I'll hand over to Father Lough now as he takes us to the physical place that is the Pilgrim Path, but where we can also be silent and listen to God. Father Lough.
Oh, thank you, Mary, for that warm welcome. Let me add my own word of welcome to the welcome that Mary has offered to you all on Lough Derg's behalf. And I'm looking forward to sharing this little time with you this evening. Glad that you're able to join me, and have had many blessings from the Lord myself on the Pilgrim Path, particularly over this last year since past September. I have been walking it faithfully at least once a week, and bringing with me prayers that come from pilgrims, people who send in requesting prayers for particular intentions and so on. So really, I've really come to love the path more and more. What I want to offer you essentially then is a reflection on my experience and the experience that people may hope to have praying the Pilgrim Path. But I'll first say a few words about the story of the Pilgrim Path, how what we now call the Pilgrim Path came to be, and then offer you a little context in terms of both history and geography, where the Pilgrim Path fits into the wider Lough Derg story. And I'm going, I hope, to share the screen. So this is the map that was made of the Pilgrim Path, and that's displayed on our notice boards for the path. You will see this is the visitor centre that you're familiar with, coming out to Station Island. So the path starts and finishes there. The first short section of it runs to St. Bridget's Well. That's about a 2 kilometre section. And from St. Bridget's Well, a further 2 kilometre section takes you by this lower route here, which is near the shore, to a T-junction here where you come back up on the Forest Road. And turning right there, then the path leads in a loop around this headland to the mainland just opposite Saints Island, which is where the monastery that St. Davok founded, we believe in the 6th century, that's where the monastery existed until about the 1600s. And then coming back by the loop, you retrace your steps here, but instead of turning back down the way you come out, you go straight on until you come to a left turn here where there's an old quarry. The road here climbs up and emerges from the forest about here, and then you have views over the lake. It continues at a high level and then starts to decline again, to fall again, until it rejoins the original path just before you come back to Bridget's Well and then back home. So it's really, I think of it always as sections of 2 kilometres. 2 kilometres to Bridget's Well, 2 kilometres to this T-junction, and 2 kilometres to the water's edge opposite Saints Island. So for people, so the full walk then is 6 there and 6 back. And for people who want to perform the walk, to do the pilgrimage without the full 12, and I myself on a weekly basis, I suppose maybe every 3rd or 4th time I have a chance to do the full walk. More often I take a turn here and do an 8 kilometre section, or I might, you can actually drive to park at St. Bridget's Well. Sometimes I drive that far and then do the second part of the loop. So that's just the shape of the Pilgrim Path. When Father Moan became prior in 1990, somewhere in his early years, with the help of a FOSS scheme, a local community employment scheme, and by cooperation with Cuilche, the Irish Forestry Service, on whose land the path is located and who own the paths that we use are all forestry roads or forestry paths, with cooperation from them. Father Mohan and his team and the Lough Derg team, they worked on this first section of the path from the visitor centre to St. Bridget's Well. And in particular, I remember that in the Jubilee year 2000, Lough Derg invited people, particularly from our own diocese of Clogher, with the aim that every day during Jubilee year 2000, somebody would come in a pilgrim spirit to Lough Derg. Now, obviously, they wouldn't be going out to Station Island over the winter section of that, but St. Bridget's Chapel at the mainland had already been opened, and there was a provision there in a little, I suppose, a little mobile home that had been hired for the year, where people could make a cup of tea and get warmed up in the cold weather. And we also put together some prayers that they could walk, if they wished, to St. Bridget's Well and back in a little local pilgrimage. So that was, if you like, the beginning of the modern Pilgrim Path. But the path had already, the pathways as such had already been there. In 1998, an initiative of the Heritage Council sought to promote 7 medieval Irish pilgrim paths for community involvement, local tourism, and so on. And the Lough Derg path was one of these. And so over a period of a number of years, there were explorations and so on. This is what you're looking at on the screen there is the booklet that was produced, a 32-page booklet, rather well produced, with background and a guide to the path and information and so on. So the path takes off here from the statue of Patrick the Pilgrim. This statue was itself a project for the Jubilee year, commissioned from Ken Thompson, not unveiled until 2002, but that's where the path takes off from. And this is one of the original signs that was put up at that time, and that's the style that crosses over the fence at the start of the Pilgrim Path. You see there the way markers that were also put out at that time. Going back to the briefly to the map, it's also kind of maybe worthy of note that the original forest paths, I learned this just today from a man who worked in the forestry at that time. The paths were there. He actually worked on this lower stretch here, which is the one that most nearly follows the very ancient Pilgrim Path. But the forest roads were upgraded themselves in the 1960s. So path was there. When I was working on the pilgrimage, on the 3-day pilgrimage through the 1980s and that, I used to sometimes take the boat to the mainland and use the path as a walk. But it wasn't formally inaugurated at that time as a pilgrim path. There were a few developments since that, including a further development of an Irish Pilgrim Paths Ireland, a wider association of pilgrim paths. That was in 2013. And then for a number of years, there was harvesting of trees going on in the path, and large transporters and that, and the ground was cut up and the traffic was on it. So there were a few years there that really the path wasn't very inviting. And beginning then in 1999, we were planning to refurbish, and our men did work at St. Bridget's Well. The water is quite high in the lake, higher than it traditionally had been, and very often, even it can still happen if there's high water, that Bridget's Well is actually in the lake rather than on the side of the lake. But that work was work that our men did to refurbish, and we put up these new signs. Maureen designed them for us. We were just about to take delivery of them when we went into lockdown, so we had to put the whole thing on pause. But it meant that when we discovered that we couldn't open up for the traditional pilgrimage or even for one-day retreats, we were able then to get the signs into place, and our men also renewed the way down there to St. Bridget's Chair on the lake shore and so on. So we were ready to go with activity on the Pilgrim Path, and we actually planned at that time to offer an organised pilgrimage on the Pilgrim Path. But I'll come back to that later on. To speak briefly then about the earlier kind of the history of the path, you can think of it again in three sections. That in fact our present departure point for Station Island is relatively recent. That location has only been in use for about 150 years, somewhere in the middle of the 1800s, we think about 1846 or 47, something like that. And that's a black and white photograph showing where originally this was the boathouse. Here are pilgrims queuing for the boat, and the horse-drawn conveyances that had brought them out from Petticoat, waiting to go back and collect more pilgrims. This is a view by the antiquarian Wakeman, who was a good friend of Canon O'Connor, who wrote an account of the pilgrimage published in about 1881. And this is a sketch that Wakeman did of the island in 1877. So you see the island there, and you can notice that there's no sign of, obviously no basilica, that was the 1920s, no ladies' hospice, 1912, no men's hospice, 1880s. What you see here is St. Mary's, as it was then. You can see the tip of the bell tower peeping out behind it. And here, further away in the island, this is part of the old St. Patrick's that would later be replaced by the pilgrimage. So that's where it's from the as I say, about 1846 was a famine year. 30,000 pilgrims are recorded as having made the pilgrimage in the famine year. And I wonder whether it was that greater influx of pilgrims that occasioned the move to this new site, which was more accessible, particularly, and became even more so when the Leslies opened a new road from Petticoat. Before that, access the boating for the pilgrimage was from here. This is Port Creevy, where St. Bridget's Well is, and you can still see the remains of a little jetty that was used at that time. There was a pathway, the ancient pathway came down to the water's edge. It came over the hills and it reached the lake shore at that point. So that was the obvious point then for boating to take place when people started to go directly from the shore to Station Island. On the Ordnance Survey map in 1830, at that time, remains of that ancient road were already, the surveyors for the map actually saw them and marked them on the map. So there's a stretch here that comes up and comes over the hill. This is a high point here at St. Avog's Chair. You know, it didn't actually go over the top. It followed the run of the land, and it was to be seen again here where it reached the lake shore at what is now St. Bridget's Well, marked there as a spa well. So that's St. Bridget's Well now, and how it's developed, a parking place there at St. Bridget's Well. This is a view over Station Island from up at St. Avog's seat. And this picture here also from a little bit further on the high ground gives a sense of just how extensive and how deep the bay is there at Port Creevy, what great shelter it gives for boating when conditions might be against you. The present jetty is about here. So there's a very deep bay there at Port Creevy. And obviously it's a much longer journey out to the island from that bay at Port Creevy. This is a Carve's map published in 1660, but interestingly, some research that was done recently, the sketching for this this map was actually, and the survey for it was actually done in the late 1920s. So this shows the island before the destruction of 1632, when everything on Station Island was levelled, and all the stones either thrown in the lake or carted off so that nothing could be rebuilt. St. Patrick's cross, as you know, if you see it, you can see that it's repaired about 1/3 way up. It was broken and thrown, and the top of it is still missing. The little metal cross that's on it is obviously not original, but it was one of the only things that was rescued at that time. And the station, the penitential beds, as we call them, here, they're the remains of monastic cells from early times, but the ones that we see today are reconstructed because they were also levelled in 1632. This church here is in the location where St. Mary's now stands, and this caverna purgatory, this is what was so-called the cave. This is where people kept their vigil at that time. The island is now about 3 times the size that it was then, because the new hostel is built here, and the men's hostel is here. The basilica is built at that place. The flood room, Davog House here. So really, most of the present building is on sites reclaimed from the lake. Now, before that, pilgrims coming from, and there were medieval pilgrims, 30-something of them that we know by name, that came in the 12, 13, 1400s, and they would have approached following the river courses and by boat, because the road system now in the 13, 14, 1500s, but they come up here. This is Devonish Island. On Lower Lough Derg, they would have had hospitality there. They might have got hospitality. There was a monastery at Killidees. There was a monastery on White Island, and they might have landed here near Kesh and come by this route. But more often, they went round the far side of, this is Bow Island, the Petticoat Kesh, or sorry, the Kesh-Balik Road runs along that island. But here is where McGrath's Castle is, what we call locally here the Waterfoot, and they picked up this ancient pilgrim path that led them out to the island at that time. And they were heading for Saint's Island. So from the time of St. Davog until about the 1600s, when in the Reformation the monastery was confiscated and destroyed, pilgrims went not directly to Station Island, but to Saint's Island. And they had hospitality there from the monks. And after they had said their prayers for 9 days was the traditional thing, then for 1 day they were rowed across. Whoops, a daisy. I clicked instead of dragging the thing. But anyway, this is a stretch of the pilgrim path from St. Bridget's Well, heading off, and this is the stretch that now corresponds most nearly to the ancient line of the pilgrim path. And this slide here shows the scene at the mainland, just across from Saint's Island. So this is Saint's Island, where the original monastery was, and you see here in the water, you see stones which are the remains of a causeway that for some time led out. There was actually pedestrian access to the island. This is an aerial view of Saint's Island. Here at the where the figure 8 is, the stone bridge or the stone causeway, and it went out from there into the water about this far. And from the island then, another stone causeway came out, and the middle section of it, where the water was very deep, it's I think about 3 or 4 meters deep at that point, the middle section was bridged by a bridge of timbers. I don't know, it's not actually recorded just exactly how long that lasts, but it was Station Island or Saint's Island that the pilgrims went to, and this is the statue you're familiar with of St. Davog in the Basilica. So this is myself with a group of pilgrims then on the path. When we found, as I say, that we couldn't open in the lockdown situation, and so we created a pilgrimage that people could follow along the Pilgrim Path. So this is myself out on the path with a group of pilgrims at that time, and the pilgrims who came, we had I think it was maybe about 6 days in all. We had a few days that we were just testing the thing out, and then we organised ourselves better, and so then we went back into a closed down situation. So this is the pilgrimage that we devised then. This is a group down at St. Bridget's Well. The pilgrimage that we devised has stational elements in it. In other words, there are places along the route where there are stops, or people are invited to stop and pause for prayer. So this is the pause for prayer at St. Bridget's Well. The pilgrimage takes place in what I think of as a sacred landscape. Here we see St. Bridget's chair. So this is just a naturally occurring boulder of gneiss, which is the rock that's common in this part, but it sits on the shore of the lake. The tradition the legend grew up that St. Bridget had sat here waiting for a boat to come and take her across to Station Island. But of course, even if Bridget had got this far, there were no boats going directly to Station Island. The boats were where you went to was Saints Island, and the monks rowed you across from there. But the people's religious imagination saw this, recognized it as the shape of a chair, and imagined St. Bridget then sitting on it, waiting to go across. The other view here is a rock on the top of the hill, which is known as St. Davog's Seat. Now, this is a naturally occurring rock. It's also, the material of it is also what they call banded gneiss, and it's a high viewpoint. But again, it was named for St. Davog as one of the great patron saints of the area. And one of the things that I love about the Pilgrim Path, and that I find that enters my prayer on the Pilgrim Path, is what I think of as the book of nature. So we can think of what we see on the path, and we're in a simple enough kind of landscape, and but we can read. Pope Francis talks about there's the book of the scriptures, and God writes obviously his word in the book of the scriptures, but he also writes his word in the book of nature. And there's not a lot of spectacular scenery on the path, but there is a sense of being in the landscape that God created. This is what they call the Black Lough, which is one of the later stretches of the path as you come back around the headline. And sometimes the joy that I get from nature on the path is from the spaces and from the wider kind of vista. And sometimes the delight that I get from nature on the path is in the smaller detail. This is a photograph that was taken during a time of frost. It's just a seed head, but really kind of picked out in the frost. And there's not a time that I'm out walking the Pilgrim Path, but there isn't something new, something different that draws my attention, maybe something that I've seen before, but it takes my attention in a new way, and it moves me to praise and to prayer with the Lord. At the point where if you remember that T-junction, where you come up to the T-junction, you go right for Saints Island, and when you come back again, you pass that T-junction, and as you round the corner, you come to an old quarry. Now, the quarry was used when the forestry people were making the roads through the forest, but it's been disused for several decades now. But I've been in pilgrimage in the Holy Land, and in Jerusalem, I remember learning that the archaeologists now believe that Calvary was actually this on the site of a disused quarry just on the edge of Jerusalem. And so the thought came to me that if we were to have Mass on somewhere on the Pilgrim Path, that this quarry would be the place for it. And this naturally, that great flat stone was there. Now it wasn't sitting as flat as that, but Joe and Tom and Reese got at it and flattened it for me so that I can use it for Mass if there's a group out there. And again, I'm smiling as I see this photograph, and I see the stones here. People took this just on their own initiative. People took to maybe had carried a stone or kind of thought, oh, the stone will represent my prayers, and so they left the stone on the rock as we came to celebrate Mass. Another aspect of the prayerfulness of the path for me, sometimes there is the delight of sharing the path. This is a bit like the pilgrimage itself, that it can happen that a conversation that you have in the middle of the night between the stations or over a cup of tea or somewhere sitting around putting down the long second day on the pilgrimage, sometimes that's the way that God speaks to you when you're doing the pilgrimage on Lough Derg. And particularly in those times, well, more recently now I've been walking it on my own, but sometimes I meet local people out here. They're saying their prayers, or they're just maybe out for a walk, and I have a chance of some little conversation, and they maybe talk a bit about how they're getting on and how they're struggling with the lockdown or whatever. So there's the value if I'm on the path with companions, or people are doing it as a group. There's the value of the conversations that we can have. But then this other stretch here reminds me, or makes me kind of think of the value of the time when I'm walking on my own, or if I'm with a group, that I peel off from the group and walk in silence. We had a group of 16 young adults who walked the Pilgrim Path with me in mid-August. And one of the things that I proposed to them was that for a particular stretch of the path, they might choose to walk on their own and to walk it with the Lord, to kind of let Jesus be their companion, and to just to open their hearts to Jesus and to listen to see what Jesus was saying. And I know that several of them afterwards told me that this was the most valuable part of the Pilgrim Path experience, that time they had in one-to-one with Jesus. Again, this is just the detail. Some spiders' webs. Normally, you don't notice the spiders' webs unless there's dew or frost or something like that. But there they are, part of nature, part of God's wonderful creation. And details like that tend to remind me of just how small I am in the overall pattern of things, and so I bring myself to the Lord in that sense. And then we have placed along the Pilgrim Path, we have placed our Lough Derg values, 9 values. They're not new. The formation of the way they're formulated is new, but the values themselves are not new. They're the very ancient values of Lough Derg. But we have placed them along the Pilgrim Path and invite people to pause and to ponder, and maybe to pray as they go along the path. So those are the values. This is a group with me at the cross at the far end of the path, just across from the entry to the original entry to St. Silent. We were saying our prayer to St. Davog there as we got to the end, to that furthest point on the Pilgrim Path. So let me finish it there, what I want to say, and I'd be very glad to respond to any comments or questions that that people have. Thank you very much for your attention. And you can see me again. Wouldn't that be a treat? Or Mary, you've got actually. Better again.
Better again, certainly. Well, Father Lough, thank you so much for that wonderful, I was going to say potted history, but it was anything but a potted history of the Pilgrim Path and its association with the Lough Derg pilgrimage. And I have to say, I learn something new every time I hear Father Lough talk about Lough Derg and the Pilgrim Path. Such an amazing knowledge and an amazing memory for dates and detail, and oh, incredible.